5 secrets. 5 small additions to a routine you already do every single morning. None of them expensive, none of them complicated, and together they can make your eyes look brighter, more lifted, and genuinely years younger by the time you walk out the door. These are not mistakes to fix. These are the small extra touches makeup artists have quietly used for years on mature clients. The details that never make it into a typical drugstore tutorial because they take an extra 30 seconds most people are not willing to spend, except the ones who actually see the difference and never skip them again. Today, I am walking you through all 5, one at a time, and I am saving the secret that ties every single one of them together, the one that determines whether all of this beautiful work actually lasts past 9 in the morning for the very end. Do not skip ahead, because it changes how long everything else on this list actually holds up throughout your day. Welcome back to Stylish 60 Plus, the channel where we talk honestly about what actually works for our faces at this stage of life. Let's start with secret number 1, the fastest and most immediately noticeable change on this entire list. Secret 1, the inner corner diamond. This is genuinely the single technique makeup artists reach for backstage more than almost any other when a client needs to look instantly more awake in a matter of seconds, and it takes less time than finding a matching pair of earrings. Using a small amount of a pearly, light-reflecting highlight, either a cream stick or a soft shimmer powder, dot it directly into the inner corner of your eye, right where the upper and lower lash lines meet near the bridge of your nose. Then blend it gently with your fingertips so it sits like a small, soft point of light rather than a hard, obvious dot. Here is why this particular spot matters so much more than people expect. The inner corner of the eye is naturally one of the deepest, most shadowed areas of the entire face. And as the skin around the eyes gradually loses a small amount of volume with age, that inner corner shadow tends to deepen slightly further, which is part of what reads as tiredness even on days you feel completely rested. A small point of light placed exactly there does something almost immediate to the eye. It visually pushes that shadow back, brightens the entire inner eye area, and creates the illusion of more space between your eyes and your nose, which reads as fresher and more awake within seconds of looking in the mirror. I think of a client named Nancy whenever I teach this one because she came to me convinced her eyes simply looked permanently tired no matter how much sleep she got or how much concealer she applied underneath them. The very first time we added this small highlight together, she actually laughed out loud in the mirror because the change was so much more immediate and dramatic than anything she had tried before, and it had taken us less than 10 seconds to do. A small additional detail that makes this secret even more effective. Extend that same small point of light very slightly along the very inner portion of your lower lash line, just the innermost quarter, using a soft pencil in a pale pink or champagne shade. This continues the brightening effect downward rather than leaving it as one isolated dot, creating a soft, continuous glow along the entire inner eye area that reads as naturally luminous rather than obviously applied. There is one more layer to this secret worth mentioning, because it explains why some women try a highlight in this area and feel disappointed with the result, assuming the technique itself does not work for them. Texture matters enormously here. A highlight with large, chunky glitter particles will sit unevenly in the naturally softer skin of the inner corner and can actually draw attention to any texture rather than smoothing it away. Look specifically for a formula described as finely milled, pearlescent, or a soft metallic finish, rather than anything labeled glitter or sparkle. The particles in a well-formulated highlight are small enough to blend seamlessly into skin, creating a glow that looks like your own natural luminosity rather than a visible product sitting on top of it. It is also worth mentioning timing within your routine. This inner corner highlight works best as one of the very last steps in your eye makeup. Applied after your eyeshadow and liner are already complete, since applying it too early can cause your other products to disturb or dull the shimmer as you continue working around the rest of the eye. Save it for the final 60 seconds of your routine, and you will notice the brightening effect looks considerably more crisp and intentional than if it gets slightly muddied underneath layers applied afterward. I want to address one more small question that comes up often once women start using this technique regularly, whether it works equally well for every eye color and skin tone, since so many beauty tips online seem to assume one universal starting point. The wonderful thing about this particular secret is that it genuinely does adapt easily. On deeper skin tones, a slightly warmer gold-toned highlight tends to look most luminous rather than ashy. On fairer skin tones, a cooler, more silvery pearl shade often blends more seamlessly. The underlying principle, a small point of reflected light exactly at the inner corner, remains identical regardless of your particular coloring, and only the specific undertone of the product needs any adjustment at all. Secret TWO. 8 Brow Bone A Arch Highlight. Secret 2, the brow bone arch highlight, and this one works directly with a piece of bone structure most of us never think about consciously, even though it sits right above our eyes every single day. Just beneath your eyebrow, following the natural curve of your brow bone, there is a subtle ridge of bone that catches light more than the surrounding skin. Makeup artists have used this exact spot for decades to create an instant, natural-looking lift, and it becomes even more valuable as we get older, because that small ridge is precisely the area that helps counteract any softness that has developed in the eyelid beneath it. Using a soft matte or satin finish shade only slightly lighter than your natural skin tone, sweep it gently just beneath the arch of your brow, following the natural curve rather than a straight line, and blend the edges so there is no harsh line separating it from your eyeshadow beneath. This single sweep does something remarkable to the entire eye area. It creates a subtle sense of separation between your eyelid and your brow, which visually opens up the entire eye, and it catches ambient light throughout the day in a way that reads as a natural, healthy glow rather than an obviously applied highlight. Here is the detail almost nobody explains about this particular secret. The shade you choose matters enormously. Too light, and it can look chalky or obviously artificial, especially in bright daylight or under camera lighting during a video call. Too shimmery, and it can actually emphasize any texture or fine lines in that specific area rather than smoothing them visually. The ideal shade sits in a soft, warm ivory or pale champagne tone with only the faintest hint of shimmer, matte enough to look like healthy skin rather than an obvious cosmetic effect, but not so flat that it fails to catch any light at all. I want to mention a client named Helen here, because she had always associated highlighter exclusively with cheekbones and had genuinely never once considered using it anywhere near her eyes. The first time we added this soft sweep beneath her brow together, she told me her whole face looked more awake, and she could not immediately identify why, since we had not touched her eyeshadow or liner at all that day. That is exactly the quiet power of this particular secret. It works almost invisibly, without ever announcing itself as a specific product or technique, which is precisely why it looks so genuinely natural once it is done well. One final tip that makes this technique easier to execute consistently. Use a small, slightly rounded brush rather than your fingertip for this specific step, since a brush gives you far more control over exactly where the product sits along that narrow ridge of bone, while a fingertip tends to spread the product more broadly than intended, softening the precise lift effect we are aiming for here. I also want to mention how this secret interacts with glasses, since so many of us wear them daily now, whether for reading or all the time, lenses, especially with any kind of anti-reflective coating, can sometimes flatten or dull subtle makeup details when viewed up close, which means a brow bone highlight that reads as beautifully lifted to the naked eye can occasionally look slightly less noticeable through a lens. If you wear glasses regularly, it is worth choosing a shade with just slightly more shimmer than you might otherwise pick, enough to still catch and reflect light even through your lenses, without tipping over into looking overdone when you take your glasses off. And one more small but meaningful detail. This highlight works beautifully as a finishing touch even on days you choose to skip eyeshadow altogether, layered directly over bare lid skin along with a coat of mascara. It is often the single fastest way to look considerably more put together in under a minute, which makes it one of the most valuable secrets on this entire list for busy mornings when a full eye look simply is not realistic. Secret 3F3. Heat Lash Curling. Secret 3, Heated Lash Curling, and this is a small tool swap that surprises almost every woman who tries it for the first time. A traditional metal eyelash curler works beautifully on many lash types, but as lashes naturally become a little coarser, a little more resistant to holding a curl, or simply more sparse with age, a cold metal curler often produces a curl that begins relaxing back towards straight within an hour or two, which quietly undoes a good portion of the lift we work to create. A heated lash curler, warmed for just a few seconds before used the same way a curling iron warms hair, applies a small amount of gentle heat directly to the lash as it curls, which helps the lash hold that curved shape considerably longer throughout the day, in exactly the same way heat helps hair hold a curl far better than simply rolling it cold ever could. This is not a dramatic or expensive tool. Most heated lash curlers cost roughly the same as a good mascara, and they typically run on a small battery, warming within seconds and cooling down quickly enough to store safely in a regular makeup bag. I think of a client named Dorothy whenever this secret comes up because she had genuinely stopped curling her lashes altogether years earlier, telling me the curls simply never lasted long enough to feel worth the extra step in her morning routine. The very first time we tried a heated curler together, she was surprised to find her lashes still held a visible lift by the time she left the salon several hours later, something her old metal curler had never managed to do for more than the first hour or so. Here is the correct technique for using one safely and effectively. Make sure the curler has cooled to a comfortably warm temperature, never hot before it ever touches your lash line, testing it briefly against the back of your hand first if you are ever uncertain. Starting at the base of the lashes, hold gently for just 3 to 5 seconds, then move the curler slightly outward along the length of the lash and hold again briefly. Repeating this in small sections rather than clamping once at the base and pulling straight through, which is the same principle we use with a traditional curler but adapted slightly for the gentler, more gradual heat. One important safety note worth mentioning clearly: always apply mascara after curling rather than before, since curling already coated lashes can cause unnecessary breakage. And never use a heated curler on lashes that have just been treated with a lash serum that same day, since the combination of active ingredients and heat can occasionally cause irritation on more sensitive eyelid skin. There is a small maintenance detail worth knowing as well, since it affects how well this tool continues to perform over time. The small silicone or rubber pad inside a heated curler wears down gradually with regular use, generally lasting several months of daily application before it needs replacing. A pad that has become worn or slightly hardened will not transfer heat as evenly, which can result in an uneven curl with one section of the lash line lifting more than another. Most heated curlers sell inexpensive replacement pads, and simply swapping this small piece every few months keeps the tool performing as well as it did the very first time you used it. I also want to address a concern that comes up often when women first hear about a heated tool near the eye area. A very reasonable hesitation given how delicate that skin is. Modern heated lash curlers are specifically engineered to warm only to a gentle, controlled temperature, considerably cooler than a curling iron or straightener used on hair, and they are designed with safety in mind for exactly this sensitive area. That said, it is always worth testing the temperature briefly against the back of your hand before every single use, and discontinuing use immediately if you ever notice any redness or discomfort, treating your own comfort as the final word over any general guideline. Secret 4. Finger blended wash. Secret 4, the finger blended wash. And this is one of the fastest techniques on this entire list. Genuinely something you could do in under a minute on a morning when you simply do not have time for a full eyeshadow routine. Instead of using multiple shades and several brushes, a single cream eyeshadow, applied and blended entirely with your fingertip rather than any tool at all, can create a soft, luminous wash of color across the entire lid that looks polished and intentional with almost no effort. Here is why this particular technique works so beautifully on mature skin specifically. Cream formulas warm slightly upon contact with your fingertip, which allows the product to melt into the natural texture of the eyelid rather than sitting on top of it the way a powder sometimes can, especially on skin that has become slightly drier or more textured with age. Your fingertip also applies gentle, even pressure that a stiff brush cannot replicate, pressing the color into the skin rather than dragging across the surface, which produces a soft, diffused finish that never looks harsh or overly defined, exactly the quality we want on a softened, mature lid. The technique itself is refreshingly simple. Take a small amount of cream shadow in a warm bronze, soft rose, or muted taupe, depending on your coloring, and press it gently into the center of your lid using your ring finger, which naturally applies lighter, gentler pressure than your index finger. Gradually work it outward toward the crease and slightly upward toward the brow bone, tapping and blending rather than dragging, until the color fades to almost nothing at the edges with no visible line where the color stops. I think of a client named Sylvia whenever I teach this particular secret because she had always considered herself someone who simply did not have time for eye makeup most mornings, sticking only to mascara on busy days. Once she saw how quickly and beautifully a single cream shadow applied with her fingertip could transform her entire look, she told me it became her new go-to on rushed mornings, replacing what used to be no eye makeup at all with something that took barely any additional time yet made a genuinely noticeable difference in how awake and put together she looked. One small tip that elevates this technique even further. If you want a bit more definition without adding a second product, use your ring finger to press a very small amount of the same cream shadow along your upper lash line as well, essentially using it as a soft, smudged liner in the exact same warm tone as your lid. This creates a beautifully cohesive, monochromatic eye that looks deliberately styled even though the entire look came from one single product and a few unhurried minutes. Choosing the right shade family matters more than most women realize when relying on a single product to do this much work. If your skin has warmer undertones, a soft terracotta, warm bronze, or muted copper cream shadow tends to look most natural, echoing the same warmth already present in your complexion. If your skin leans cooler, a soft mauve, dusty plum, or muted top works with that same cooler undertone rather than fighting against it. Choosing a shade family that already complements your natural coloring means the finished look requires almost no additional adjustment, since the color is essentially working with your face rather than being layered artificially on top of it. It is also worth knowing that cream formulas do behave slightly differently depending on how oily or dry your particular eyelid tends to be throughout the day. On oilier lids, a cream shadow may need a very light dusting of translucent powder pressed gently on top once blended, simply to help it hold its position for several hours rather than gradually shifting. On drier lids, this powder step can usually be skipped entirely, since the cream formula tends to sit beautifully in place on its own without any additional help. Essie Sortav. We have covered 4 secrets so far: the inner corner diamond, the brow bone arch highlight, heated lash curling, and the finger blended wash. Secret 5 is the one I promised you at the very beginning of this video, the one that determines whether all 4 of the previous secrets actually last through your entire day rather than fading, creasing, or shifting by early afternoon. Secret 5. The Setting Mist Lock. A fine, hydrating setting spray misted lightly over your finished eye makeup from about arm's length away. Does something genuinely different from simply letting your makeup sit and dry on its own. It slightly melts the very top layer of every product you just applied into one another, blending eyeshadow, highlight, and liner into a single cohesive layer that clings to the skin considerably more evenly than any of those products would on their own, while also adding a small amount of moisture back into skin that tends to be a little drier with age, which helps prevent the fine line creasing we have talked about elsewhere on this channel. Here is the detail that makes this final step actually work rather than simply adding an extra product for no real benefit. Hold the setting spray at least 8 to 10 inches away from your face, misting in a light, even sweep rather than one concentrated blast in a single spot. Close your eyes gently while misting and resist the urge to touch or rub your eye area for at least 30 seconds afterward, giving the fine mist enough time to settle and lock everything in place rather than smudging it while it is still slightly damp. I think of a client named Frances whenever I recommend this final step because she had always assumed her eye makeup simply faded on its own as the day went on, an inevitable part of getting older that she had quietly accepted without ever questioning. The moment she started finishing her routine with a light setting mist, she told me her eye makeup at the end of a long day looked remarkably similar to how it looked that morning, something she genuinely had not experienced in years, and it changed how she thought about every other step in her routine, since she finally trusted that the effort she put in each morning would actually hold. Put all 5 of these secrets together, and here is what you have built. Brightness at the inner corner. Lift along the brow bone. Long-lasting curl in your lashes. A soft, luminous wash of color across the lid. And a setting mist that locks the entire look in place for hours. None of these 5 secrets require an expensive new routine or a dramatic change to anything you already do. They are simply small, specific additions, each one taking only seconds, that together create a result considerably more polished and youthful than any single one of them could achieve alone. I want to leave you with a thought that ties all five of these secrets together, because I think it matters more than any single technique on its own. Every one of these five additions works quietly in the background without ever announcing itself as a specific product or an obvious trick. Nobody looking at you will ever be able to point to exactly what changed. They will simply notice that you look brighter, more rested, and somehow more like yourself on your very best day without being able to explain precisely why. That quiet, invisible quality is genuinely the mark of makeup done well at any age, but it becomes especially valuable as we get older, when the goal was never to look like someone else or someone younger, only to look like the fullest, most rested, most radiant version of exactly who we already are. These five secrets take, altogether, perhaps 3 to 4 extra minutes added to a routine you already do every single morning. That is a remarkably small investment of time for a result this noticeable. And I genuinely believe once you try even 2 or 3 of them together, you will wonder why nobody ever mentioned them to you sooner. If you are watching this and feeling slightly overwhelmed at the idea of adding 5 new steps all at once, please hear this clearly. Nobody needs to try all 5 tomorrow morning. Pick just one, whichever one felt the most exciting to you as you were watching, and give it a real try for a full week before adding a second. Small, sustainable changes built one at a time tend to last far longer than an entirely new routine adopted all at once and abandoned within a few days out of sheer overwhelm. Beauty routines, at their very best, should feel like a gift you give yourself each morning, not one more obligation added to an already full day. So tell me, out of these 5 secrets, which one are you adding to your routine first thing tomorrow morning? I read every single comment, and I would love to know which one surprises you the most once you try it.